Bonjour everyone and welcome back to my channel, The Waves of Your Soul. I am so excited for today's video because I will be presenting to you the whole Green Glyph collection that is upcoming from James R. Eads. We're gonna be looking at his new tarot deck, the existing Lenormand that is coming out again, his new rune deck and his new Oracle deck, all part of this beautiful collection, as well as the guidebook that accompanies everything. All of those new decks are coming up on Kickstarter. The campaign is launching Monday, October the 3rd. Then they will be available for retail. And so we're gonna be taking a look at everything. I'm gonna give you my opinions because James Teams got in contact with me. They very kindly offered to send these decks to me for review in advance, so I got those advance copies. It's truly a big honor for me. And I'm very grateful. So thank you so much first of all to the team for sending me advance copies so that I could use them in advance of doing my review. That being said, if you've watched my channel before, you know I always give you the tea as well. And so even though those decks have been sent to me, I still give you my full honest opinions. I'll tell you what I like, what I don't like. I'm just so excited to share this with you. If you're new here, hi, my name is Marine, I'm a French tarot reader and I love everything tarot, oracle and self-empowerment related. Here on this channel, I love talking about tarot and oracle decks, they're a huge passion of mine, and I also love offering pick a card readings in the line of helping you to help yourself. That's very much my vibe. If you'd like to see any of those things on your timeline, don't hesitate to join the tide and subscribe to the channel. All of my social media links are gonna be in the description box below, as well as all of the information about this launch, so all the specs about each deck. I'm gonna give you all the tea. I'm also gonna put chapters so that if you're only interested in one of them, you can look at the chapter down below, again in the description box, to see one deck specifically, or if you want to see the whole of it, I invite you to watch the whole video. And without further ado, let's go for a little journey into the Green Glyph collection. As I mentioned in the intro, the Green Glyph collection consists of 4 decks, a Lenormand, a rune deck, an oracle deck, and a tarot deck, as well as an extra hardbound cover book. So we're going to be looking at everything. When I received the copies, it came in this beautiful box. So that's how you could store if you decide to get the whole collection. It will come in this beautiful kind of setup, so you can store all of the decks and the extra book together. It looks really gorgeous on your altar or in your shelves. But of course, if you're only interested in one of those decks, this is where hopefully my video can help you decide which is the one that is most resonating with you. You might have heard of the Green Glyph Lenormand before, because this deck was actually published already by James in, I believe, 2019. And after the publication of this first deck, James decided to work on creating other additional decks so that everything could be used together. And this is the premise of all of those decks, and this is where I think that this is something I've not really seen before. The ability to use an oracle, a tarot, a rune deck, and a Lenormand all together. So we have a tarot deck, we have an oracle deck, we have the Lenormand, and we have a rune deck. And now this is what got me excited about this particular campaign and this particular launch, is the idea of having 4 decks that you can use separately or together as one mega deck, where you have so much freedom, you can do whatever you want. If you watch my channel, you know I'm a very big advocate of you do you boo. I feel like divination and tarot exploration and oracle exploration should be fun. It should be something that makes you happy. It should be something that also helps you to go deep, but I believe that we can do that whilst still having joy there. And so the idea of having 4 decks that you could use either separately or all together combined, to me is the most exciting. As you are probably seeing from the screen right now, the backings of each of the cards are very similar in the sense that they are all green, all have this really beautiful hollow kind of edging. However, the backs are slightly different in what glyphs are present. So for example, for the oracle deck, we have slightly different glyphs than from the tarot. For the back of the rune deck, we have runes. But honestly, the idea of mixing them all together, and I have done that because I've had this copy almost 2 weeks now, so I've definitely been putting these decks to trial and I've been using them on their own and together. You can't really tell which one is which once they're all mixed in from the backings, which is why I think it was really clever, very harmonious, but they still retain a little bit of their unicity if you pay attention to the kind of glyphs that are present on the card. Each deck comes in its own special box that opens like this. Each deck comes with its own particular guidebook. So here we have the tarot box. It has its own specific guidebook, which we'll go into for the tarot part. For all of the books, the cards are held together with a little ribbon like this. And to finish up on like the production quality and the specifics of the cards, every single card is 2.5 times 3.5 inches, and the paper is 350 GSM with UV matte finish. So the cards for all the 4 decks are all the same size, and they are smaller than regular tarot or oracle size, which means that for all of you who might have smaller hands or some difficulty with shuffling, you shouldn't have the problem here. I found those cards to be very easy to shuffle, and the size is super easy to transport, and I actually really enjoy the fact that it's a smaller deck because it means you can do huge spreads. Before I get into the specifics of each deck and the extra guidebook, I want to mention that the cohesion of the deck is not just through the backings, which as I was mentioning are very similar, but also through the colors that were chosen by the creator. So he explains that the choices of color have a lot of meaning, and that for him all the yellows and golds, such as for example here in the Magician card or here in the Fehu card from the Rune deck, are linked to more positive cards, to more lightness I should say, and any kind of orange in the card refers to cards that might be more challenging and difficult. So that's another layer that this deck kind of communicates together, and that's something that could be useful for beginners in order to, especially if you're learning a specific system, this color coding could help you figure out is it something that's more light or more shadowy. Personally, I like to see every card as holding both, and so when I was reading, I didn't really take that much into consideration, especially for tarot. However, as someone who never used runes before, I think this could be really useful for me, and also as someone who is not super comfortable with Lenormand compared to tarot, with which I'm very comfortable with, I think that this could be an interesting way to add layers, and I found it helpful. So I feel like it will depend where you are on your journey. Definitely I can see the use for beginners, and then once you're more comfortable and advanced on your journey, you probably won't look at those color stories too much. I love the idea of having one big jumbo deck. I love the idea of us being able to put only a couple of cards from the oracle deck into the tarot, for example. There's just a lot that can be done. At the end of the video, I will be sharing with you how I've done that, because I've had the deck now for a couple of weeks, so I've been able to try it. I'll show you how I've been using those decks together. Hopefully that will help. But first, let's look at the tarot deck. So the tarot deck is 78 cards. It has this beautiful rainbow kind of edging, just like all of the other decks. And if you're familiar with this particular artist's work, you know that he's very well known for creating decks that can tell a story when they're put all next to each other. And for the tarot deck, this is definitely the case for the major arcana. So if you put all of the major arcana together, you will be able to see the story that is unfolding with those particular characters. I really love the choices that were made for the major arcana for this particular deck. I think the choices were really beautiful. I'm showing with you now how they all fit together from the Magician to the Hermit, and I will be showing you every single card in this particular deck. So if you don't want to see all the cards, if you want to keep some surprises, just double click on the video so it kind of advances. But like I was saying, I was truly enchanted by those majors. I think they're beautiful. Just a quick side note, you might notice that the High Priestess and the High Priest on my copy have a spelling mistake. I have an advanced copy, and so this is not the finished one, and I have contacted their team, and I have mentioned about this particular mistake. I've not heard back from them yet, but I assume that this will be fixed before this is released to the public and before the Kickstarter campaign launches. So just something to keep in mind, and if I hear anything before I post a video about that, we'll make sure to put a pinned comment below to give you the info, but just keep in mind that this is an advanced copy. I'm assuming this is why there are a couple of spelling mistakes. One of my favorite cards in the deck is this Strength card. I really adore how this elephant is carrying the chariot. I think that's beautiful. Now you can see from the Wheel of Fortune to the Star, again the story evolves. Here's another one of my favorite cards from the majors in this deck, this Wheel of Fortune. I think it's super creative. We usually see the Wheel of Fortune and something kind of boring the way it's presented. It's very repetitive. We see the wheel, there are astrological associations. I enjoy this particular take on the idea of the hermit going on this particular journey and moving towards something new. I think it's really gorgeous. So I really enjoyed this particular depiction. I love how everything is continuing and we see this particular character, you know, all the way to their death. And also what I thought was really clever was the link between the devil, and the devil is holding the tower. And I really enjoyed this particular tower representation because of the idea of the tower being an uprooting moment. You were used to seeing something that is tracked from above in traditional RWS imagery. Here, as you can see, the tower is literally uprooted. Your foundations are shaken up from the ground and you're being shaken down like kids do when they grab a toy. And the devil holding the tower makes so much sense. And this particular tower depiction of being completely uprooted, I think really translates very well the feeling that the tower moments bring in our lives. So I thought that was a very clever way of depicting this particular arcana. Here are the last cards, from the stars to the world, including the Fool, which is our number 0. I thought it was really clever that for all of those celestial cards, such as the stars, the moon, the sun, the world, you can clearly see that everything is happening in the same cosmos. I think the continuity here is very beautiful, and you can definitely see here at play some of the color coding that I was mentioning that was chosen in the decks. Yellow and gold representing more positive energies, and then all the oranges representing potential challenging energies. Here, for example, for the judgment, there's a bit of both, and I think that's quite fitting. I mean, for me, context is hugely important in terms of reading tarot. It will definitely define how to read the cards. Obviously, the position in your spread will also define if it's something you read more like in light or in shadow. But we know that judgment can bring a bit of both in terms of energies, right? It's a bit less joyous than the sun, which only has yellow. So I understand the choices that were made for the colors. Personally, like I was saying, I didn't really use them as prompts to read the tarot anyway, because I'm very familiar with it, and I relied more on the spreads I was using, or on my intuition, or on my previous knowledge. But I think for beginners it could be quite helpful as a little crutch to help you kind of remember some of the general vision of the card. Let's get into the minors and start with the wands. So you should know that each of the suits tell a story, and I personally found that reading the guidebook really helped understand the choices, the artistic choices that were made here. I will say that for the majors, you can heavily see the influence of RWS, whereas for the minors, I found that there was a lot more artistic freedom taken. I found that there was more artistic choices that were made to fit into this particular story that was based for each of the suits. And so if you're someone who's very much used to our traditional RWS and you don't really like things that go a little bit their own way, this might not be the deck for you. However, if you enjoyed a story building world and somewhere where there's a story behind it and you want to get into something else and maybe even go outside your comfort zone, then I believe this could be the tarot deck for you. So that's something to keep in mind. So for the wands, the story depicted is how humans found magic. And so the wands being linked to this idea of fire and energy and passion, this is where James decided to link this idea of magic, because usually we can link this passion and fire and fieriness within us to also intention, and how we can use that intention to create magic in the world. So as you can see, the basis of the traditional imagery is respected. For example, in the Two of Wands, we have something that is very reminiscent of the RWS. However, for some of the cards, like the Nine of Wands, we see something a bit different. I will admit, the first time I saw this card, I got a little bit confused because it reminded me of the Eight of Pentacles. But if you read the story, this is where it makes sense. So for me, this is definitely a deck where reading the guidebook, and we're gonna get into it just after that, reading the guidebook can be really truly helpful in understanding the choices. Let me show you the court cards. There's a lot of movement in the court cards for each of the suits, and so I really enjoyed them overall. I think that they were really beautiful, and so for this particular deck we follow traditional RWS naming. We have Page, Knight, Queen and King. My two favorite suits for the tarot deck are the Cups and the Pentacles, which have been renamed to Stones. And the main reason why I adore the Cup suit so much is because the story follows elephants, and I think that's really beautiful. I love elephants as animals, and I know so many of us do in the community, so I think this particular suit will make so many people happy. The story here that is represented in this particular suit is how elephants came to carry water. And again, the guidebook gives you the storyline, it has a little poem, and each card will explain to you kind of that story. But of course, you can read those cards regardless of the story and use the symbolism that you know and the knowledge that you have of tarot. I found this suit very cohesive, very beautiful to read with. This Eight of Cups is truly everything. Every time I look at it, it's just so emotional. I feel so sad for this little elephant who is having to leave his cups behind and go and enter this cave. There's just a lot of emotions there for an animal suit. I also really appreciate this Four of Cups. I thought it was beautiful, this depiction here. The mother having to leave her young one behind to go and search for food. And so I thought it's just a really beautiful rendition of the Four of Cups. The Ten of Cups, that was not my favorite. For me, it was giving me a little bit of Ten of Wands vibe. But again, reading the story, I completely understand why the choices were made. And honestly, the elephants are just everything. And the court cards are absolutely adorable. Let me show you. But of course, we have elephants again. And it kind of takes the protagonist from this particular suit and shows the evolution of this particular protagonist from being a young child to being like the king of the elephants. Let's move on to the swords. I hope that it's helpful, by the way, to see all those cards next to each other. I know that there's going to be so many flip-throughs online, people showing one card by one card, but I wanted to do something a bit different, and it helped me bond with the deck when I put all the suits together, because the fact that each suit is a different story, I found it really helpful to see the story at play. So this is why I'm showing the cards to you like this and not one by one. I hope it can be helpful to you to decide if this deck is resonating with you or not. For me, it really helped me to understand the deck better, so this is why I'm sharing it with you. But let me know in the comments for future videos if you like seeing it like this or card by card. I just wanted to do something a bit different. So for the sword, the story is how the sun and moon created the stars. So you'll see three main characters: the character of the sun, which is right here, the character of the star, which is right here, and the character of the moon, who is right here. This story made me very emotional to read. The story is very beautiful, and there's a lot of poesy behind this particular storyline. I don't want to spoil you the joy of getting through it, but I will show you the poems that was written to explain this particular ace, so that you kind of get an idea of the premise of why the choices were made for the Suit of Swords. So here, if you want to do a screenshot, you can see the poems that was written for the Ace of Swords, so you can understand the premise of the story. If you pause the video, you can read it. I won't butcher your ears with my terrible French accent and read all of this to you. Here are the court cards for the swords. Again, we see those three different characters here. As you can see, even if you don't know the story, it is still fairly easy to get your traditional meaning. I mean, the Eight of Swords, the Nine of Swords, the Ten of Swords, they look very traditional, even the Five, but it helps to have that additional layer of meaning to understand a little bit more of the background of the story. But again, it's not necessary, and that's what I really love about this whole concept and the deck and the guidebooks, which are very well written, by the way. I really love the fact that we are very much encouraged by James to do what we want. The idea is that you're free to interpret it as you want. You're free to use it as you want. You're free to go with the guidebook, go off the guidebook, use your intuition. And I love that. I think that is really liberating. I think that's really freeing. So I really appreciated that in every single guidebook we were truly encouraged to do our own thing, to use our own meaning. If we see a card and it makes us think of something, we should go off that, even if it doesn't match up with his vision. I really enjoy that. So here you have the Suit of Stones, which are pentacles. That's my second favorite suit because, hello, the wave of your soul. There's like the ocean present. I'm a cliche like that. I love the ocean. So I love this particular suit as well. This suit retells the story of how the sea formed the land, and I thought that was really cool. I love this kind of like ocean, coral and stone vibe. I think the cards are really gorgeous. I love the colors. Eight of Stones might be my favorite card of the whole Minors. I think it's really beautiful, and it kind of reminds me of home too, because if you don't know, I live on a tropical island, and it gives me all the Gaian vibes, and I really appreciate it. And I love the Eight of Pentacles as a card, so I really see the patience here and dedication that it takes for the earth to form islands and to create islands and world. So I thought that was a really beautiful concept. 10 of Stones is also absolutely adorable. Those little rocks make me so happy. So the stone suit is a huge winner in my book. I think it's beautiful and definitely a good mood. Let me show you the court cards. Again, we have page, knight, queen, and king, and really beautiful, this kind of sea world. I think, again, if you pay attention, you will notice still this use of orange and yellow. Any kind of blue and green are supposed to be neutral. Let me get into the guidebook now for the tarot deck. So in the box, so the box looks like this. It's really sturdy, and at the back you have some information and some of the cards depicted. Inside you have this particular guidebook. And I will say I've read all of the guidebooks, so for all of the decks, and honestly I can, as a guidebook lover, I can say that a lot of thought was put behind it. You have explanations as to, for each of the deck, you really truly understand the choices that were made by James. There's a lot of explanation as to how he came to create this deck. There's a lot of helpful hints on how to get familiar with your cards. There are some spreads. He even gives you an example for every time there's a spread. He actually gives you an example and how he would read it, which I think for beginners is really helpful. And even as someone who's comfortable with tarot, it's always interesting to see how someone connects the cards together. So I love when someone does that. And then for each of the cards, you have a little bit of the story, and then you have keywords for upwards and reversed, as well as of course the glyph, because each card is associated with a glyph. And on the backs of the card you will see on the back of the cards of the tarot deck, you see all the glyphs that he designed that represent all of the tarot card. It is the Green Glyph Tarot after all, and I think of those glyphs as being kind of like emojis, and I thought that it was really cool. For the minors, it is the same. On the guidebook, you get the glyph, the name, the little bit of the story, upward keywords, and downward keywords. What I really appreciate as well is that for each of the decks, you have at the back of each guidebook, you have a bibliography with other resources and where he got some of his information, or what to read to go further. And if you know me, you know that's something I always look at for in a guidebook. I love bibliographies. I love people who, do their research. So that was another big good point in my book. I'm sharing with you now videos from the last couple of the weeks of some of the spreads I've done, so that you can see how the tarot deck reads once it's spread out. 6-card spread, mind, body, spirit, past, present, future, which is something that I always like to do, especially when I'm getting to know a deck. And I'm sharing with you also another spread that I did where it was more free-flowing, just asking questions and pulling cards as I went. As you can see, all together the cards look really cool, and I really enjoy this kind of immersive, dreamlike, poetic world. This was the vibe I was given from the deck. Like I was saying, a couple of the cards for me threw me off at first, just in terms of why they were depicted this way. But again, the guidebook will definitely clear it off. And overall, I think it would be a great deck whether you're a beginner or more comfortable with tarot. Let's get into the Oracle deck, which honestly I'm the most excited with. This is my favorite of the collection. I have had so much fun with it. This is a deck I was the most looking forward to, from reading the specs and kind of understanding background behind it, and after using it I can confirm that yes, this is absolutely delightful. I love this Oracle deck. It's brilliant. So the Oracle is called the Green Glyph Oracle. Apologies for terrible pronunciation. The Green Glyph as a French person, kind of hard to say, so I'm so sorry for potentially butchering that. It comes in this beautiful box. Honestly, all the quality, the production, it's beautiful. As always, for each of the decks, you have an accompanying guidebooks, and the card come in a box like this. I'll show you the guidebook in a bit, but let's look at the cards first. The inside of the box says, a door presents itself in a dream. It's a simple door, made of wood with a grass knob. It's nothing remarkable, but where it leads is all that matters. Once the door is open, it can never be closed again. May this oracle reaffirm your choices so that you can cast fear aside for what lies on the other side. Definitely an ongoing thread of poesy with those particular decks, that bring magic to the mundane that I really appreciate. The deck is 50 cards. which is amazing size for an oracle deck. I'm very greedy, so anything above 40 I'm loving. The backs have green glyphs that are specific to the oracle, and again we have this beautiful prismatic gold gilded edges. What sets this oracle aside from the other decks though is that the cards have this beautiful gold prismatic accent on each card, and honestly it is gorgeous. Depending on how the light hits your card, it just gives it that beautiful little rainbow touch, like, ooh, magical. Let me find to you like a card that has like, look at that, rainbow. That's a good mood deck. That is absolutely a good mood deck. So let me show you the card. What I love about this particular deck is the fact that every single card depicts a symbol that is familiar to all of us. It's very rooted in modern day life, but it brings magic to day-to-day life. And I found that to be super interesting and super unique. We see here cards that are truly unlike any other deck I've seen. For example, yesterday's coffee. I love that. I love that particular symbolism, and there's so much you can draw from that. So from using all of these decks, the Oracle deck is the one I've used the most. I think it's super intuitive. I've used it already for a couple of my friends, and even for my mom, she loved it. There's something about this familiar imagery that helps everyone feel at ease, right? I think this would be a great deck to use whether you're really into the esoteric stuff or not. Like we have the Lost Parrot, for example. I think it would please a lot of people in the sense that it's tongue-in-cheek, it has a little bit of a sense of humor, it definitely has a personality. There's a lot of joy in this deck, there's a lot of personality in this deck. We see things that are not like your stereotypical oracle cards, right? The concepts are very unique, and that's what I love. I love original concepts. I love when the artist's personality shines through a deck, and I think that here you can really see that this is the case. Obviously the gold accent makes it super cute, and obviously because of the style and the artwork and the colors, it pairs beautifully with the tarot and the Lenormand and the runes. That's what it's made for. But I've read it on its own, and I found that even on its own it speaks really well. I love, again, we're very much encouraged to do what we want. So even though James provides interpretation for upwards and reverse meanings in the guidebook, he still takes a lot of time to invite you to make your own connections and make your own meanings to the card. And he invites you to go with your gut. If you feel like hummingbird represent, I don't know, let's say for example, for me, hummingbirds represent joy, and I have like a hummingbird little mobile that is hanging above my head as a reminder to look at for joy every time I wake up. Like it's a reminder for me for my gratefulness practice. When I wake up, I see the hummingbird hanging, and I remind myself to say thank you for the good things in my life. But for some of you, maybe the hummingbirds is synonym with where you come from, or your family, or a travel you did. Or maybe some of you are scared of hummingbirds, and so for you it won't have the same meaning. And so this deck, you're really encouraged to go with your gut, right? You can use obviously the meanings that are given to you, but you're encouraged also to do what you want and to follow your intuition. And I found this deck to be really, look at that, oh, so good. I found this deck to be great for when I want freedom, when I want something that allows me to be creative, that allows my intuition to speak. I think this could be also, oh, this is my favorite card, by the way. Let me show you some of my fave cards whilst I'm finishing to get my thoughts along. I think this would be a great deck for, like I was saying, using your intuition, pairing with the tarot, obviously. I think this could be fantastic for storytelling because there's just so much joy there and so much insight. I think it's definitely one that if you feel a little bit burnt out by the current oracle decks that seem to be on the market right now, that all start to look the same with the same concepts, aesthetic, and the same keywords, this is definitely super unique. And so for me, this deck was a breath of fresh air. I found it to be really fun and really freeing to use this particular oracle. So that's been my personal experience with it. I've used it on its own, and I'll share with you now some of the examples, a little spread I've done. It was just before I came back from my trip, the first time I took the plane in many years. It was a big deal for me to travel again. And if you see the spreads, straight away the messages were very clear. There's even the plane card coming in there. It was just a lot of beautiful synchronicity, so I found that this deck reads really well. The guidebook that comes with the oracle deck looks like this. You have some explanation as to why you decided to do an oracle that is so unique and different, and yet why it's so rooted in everyday life. And I think that's the beauty of it, is the fact that it's something that most of us can relate to. I think those very day-to-day mundane things that most of us would see. So really interesting guidebooks. I love the fact that there was some beginning exercises included. He gives you examples of readings and actually talks you through how he would read 3 cards together, so that's fantastic. We have some spreads. Honestly, even if this is your first oracle deck you pick up, you have a lot of information here to make you comfortable that you could reuse even with other decks later on. And then for each of the cards, it looks like this. So for example, the dinosaur card, which is one of my favorite cards. I mean, come on, how cute is that? That's a good mood card right here. So the dinosaur, you get a little bit of a write-up on the meaning of the card. So for the dinosaur, it says, a friendly looking dinosaur pops his head into the frame of the card you're looking at. He reminds you of an old friend and you feel comfortable in his presence. He smiles down at you, and as soon as you offer a smile back, he is on his way and you start to miss him even though you never really got to know him. How cute! It's just, oh, I love this little, I love those little write-ups. And then for every card you have upward keywords and reverse keywords. So if you choose to, you could read this deck reversed as well. Really great guidebook. And honestly, this is my favorite out of the whole collection. Let's move on to the Green Glyphs Lenormand. This deck was already released in 2019, and it's coming back with this particular collection because it was the inspiration, I believe the source of inspiration for the artist to create the other 3 decks to make this kind of like combo of 4 decks that could be used all together. So this was the inspiration. The deck comes in this very similar box as the other ones. As you can see, it is still one of those magnetic boxes, very beautiful. Inside we have kind of like a little, I say, prayer or intention that James has give us for the deck, which is, I thought, was a really nice touch. And then inside you have the guidebook, which we'll go into, and the cards come here. This Lenormand has additional cards, which I really appreciate. I definitely appreciate a Lenormand that is on with our times. So as well as your traditional cards that come with all of the Lenormand, because you know Lenormand is one of those divination systems. It's always the same. It's always the same amount of cards. The first card is always the rider. The second card is always the clover. It always has the same associations of traditional cards. One of those systems that's very set in stone, but it's also one of those systems that dates back from quite far. And so here, to try and bring it to 2022, we have some additional cards. So we have an extra gentleman card. If you're doing any readings for people who are in same-sex couples, for example, you'll have 2 lady cards, 2 gentleman cards, so we love that. And we also have 2 persons card, which is fantastic for any of my non-binary viewers. Then you would feel very comfortable using this deck. So again, I think those are the kind of extra touches that I personally really appreciate in modern decks. It's the idea that everyone can feel seen and everyone can feel like they can be represented in the deck. Another extra card is the Albatross. This is an additional card that you can use to replace the cross card. And when I read the guidebook, it said that the creator wanted to allow the people who didn't want any religious kind of connotation or look or symbolism in their cards to be able to use something else. So if crosses are not your thing, and that's completely fine, then you can use the Albatross card as a replacement. So I thought that was really cool. There's a big effort here to try and make everyone comfortable. So even though this was already published in 2019, apparently the box, the card finish and the gilding have been improved, so it will look different from the original. And we still have this continuous theme here of the color chosen, where blue and green are meant to be neutral. Any kind of orange signifies cards that are maybe bringing more challenges, and yellows represent cards that have more positive or kind of like lighter energies. To be completely honest, Lenormand is not a system that I use very often. It's a system I've studied a little. I'm a French person. I don't want to sound sacrilegious. I'm joking, obviously. But it's a system that, compared to Tarot and Oracle, let's just say if I was to pick between the three, Lenormand would always come last in my personal journey right now. It's not where I find the most joy or excitement. However, out of all of the Lenormand that I've seen, this one I think looks really beautiful. So that's already, as someone who's not really vibing with the system, a good incentive to use. I think the looks are very important in that case. I appreciate the fact that there is inclusion of traditional cartomancy. That's important, especially if you're learning. I find that helpful myself. And I love the little glyphs that corresponds to each of the card. I think that's a really nice touch. The artwork is really beautiful, and it does give a little bit of a modern vibe to the Lenormand, which for me always had that kind of more antiquated, I guess, feel, more so than Tarot and Oracle. But of course, this is so personal, right? I'm giving you my personal opinion. There might be some of you watching who love Lenormand and who really don't like Tarot, or who really don't like runes, and everyone is going to be different. So I'm just giving you my opinion on the deck as well as I could from someone who doesn't use Lenormand that much. I will say, though, that for the purpose of getting more into Lenormand, and I'm very aware that this is probably something I want to get into at some point, I think this deck would be a fantastic resource. And I think if you are a beginner, this would also be a fantastic resource, because I've already learned a lot from reading the deck, and I've read with Lenormand before. It's not something I am super comfortable with, but it's not something I'm completely new to either. And so I think that the artist does a great job in the guidebook at giving you the first tools to get into it if it's your first time using. There's a bibliography at the end of the guidebook, which is great, gives you more resources to get into. And overall, it's very much designed so that even if you've never picked up Lenormand in your life before, you'll be fine. Like, this is meant to be easy to use, and you can tell that there was a lot of thought behind that, so that even for those of us who are not super familiar with the system, you get enough information to get going. Personally, the way I found most joy in using the Lenormand is to mix it with the Oracle and to kind of use it as a mega Oracle deck. What I find puts me off the Lenormand system is having to learn by heart all the combination of the two cards together. Like, if I put the scythe next to the stork, it means something, but if I put the stork next to the scythe, it means another thing. And those combinations, I find personally, are sometimes a little bit tricky to understand, but mixed with the Oracle, suddenly it gives me so much freedom, because I can read the stork and the scythe not in a Lenormand system, but in a more broad oracular kind of vibe. And I found that suddenly a lot more joyous for me. So if you are like me and it's not a system that you are super familiar with, and you're kind of like a little bit intimidated by it, this is the beauty of this collection, is that you get to mix however you want. You get to do what you want. You can mix it with the runes, you can mix it with your tarot. So then it becomes this new oracle kind of vibe. And so that's how I found use in this particular deck. Just wanted to be honest and tell you my personal experience with it. The fact that the cards are smaller on all these decks means that for Lenormand, particularly, and the use of something like the Grand Tableau, it would be super easy, because the Grand Tableau is a spread that uses all 36 cards in the Lenormand, and the fact that those cards are smaller, it would take less space, and size makes a lot of sense, and it's actually super convenient. Let's get into the guidebook. It's 80 pages, just like the Oracle deck. It really does give you a lot of information if it's your first time around using Lenormand. I thought that there's a lot of help there to make this system less daunting. You have little tips on how to remember the order of the cards. You have little exercises around reading in pairs, reading in triple cards, using it for poetry. You have examples of spreads such as reading in a line, and then bigger spreads even down to le grand tableau. And everything here is explained really easily. You get a lot of info, like I was saying. So personally, I found the book super helpful. There's a lot of examples on how to read the cards. There's a lot of information there on exercises you can do, get familiar with the system, etc. And then for each of the card, it looks like this. You have the glyph that corresponds to each of the card. Again, this is a green glyph, so we have a glyph for every single card. You have the name, you have the energy, whether it's neutral, negative, or positive. You have keywords, and then you have example of combinations, which I also found really helpful. Let's move on to the last deck, which is a rune deck, before we take a look at the beautiful hardbound book that you can get as part of the collection. So it comes with a set of 24 cards. Here are the backs, they look like runes. We're still in the same theme of the same colors, but the backs are slightly different, individual to each deck, but once they're all mixed in, you wouldn't really tell the difference. Beautiful steel prismatic gold edges. And then for each single card, and we'll flip through them, you have the rune, you have the name of the rune, and you have a symbol that kind of corresponds to that energy. In the box, you also have 3 dices. Now, on my advanced copy, there was a little bit of a mistake, and so we got 3 of the same dices, but I was confirmed that when you get the finished copy, the finished products, when the Kickstarter launches, you will get 3 dices that all contains the 3 different Eads. I don't know how you say that, guys. Each dice will be different, and overall, out of all the dice, you'll get all of the runes. So just something to be aware of. And the dices, they are held here. The box looks like this. Here we have kind of like an intention that James set for the rune, which is very beautiful. It says, "May the runes guide you through future journeys with grace, compassion, and understanding. May the runes enlighten you on how to be soft in the face of fear and how to go deeper even when you don't feel brave. May the runes teach you how to let it all go, not expecting anything to come back." I really adore those little intention set for each of the decks. They're all different for each decks, and I think they're really beautiful. And then of course the cards go in here, and then you have a guidebook. We'll get in a guidebook in a bit, but first let's look at the cards. So this is based on the Elder Fuzark system. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm gonna be completely honest and say I have never used runes before. So when I found out that there was a rune deck that was going to be included in this collection, I was so excited, because I thought, what a great way for me to get into runes. And it's funny because in the guidebook, the creator says that he wanted to get into runes and couldn't quite connect to them as just physical objects, but creating cards for each of the energy of them helped him to remember more their meanings and helped him to connect more with their energy. And I'm definitely the same. I'm someone who have always wanted to get into runes, but I found it a little bit daunting to remember the meaning without any more visual information. So cards for runes make so much sense for me, who's a card person. So if you are already into runes, obviously this is something that you probably would enjoy to use within your decks to mix it all together, or to do reading with, and you could maybe even combine the card with dices or with runes you made out of stones or wood pieces. But if you're like me and you're not familiar with the system at all, I find that cards are super helpful, because not only do you get the name of the rune and the symbol of the rune, you actually get an image that tells you what the rune is about. And I think that's very helpful, and it's definitely helped me to get more acquainted with this system. And for me, it's been a great introduction to this particular system as a beginner, because suddenly I kind of understand a little bit more what each rune is about. The great thing about cards is that also you can use them, is that you can shuffle them with reversals. And so in the guidebook, there are some reversed meanings for the runes that can be reversed, because obviously sometimes for some of the runes they are mirror image, so if you read this one, for example, like this or like this, it's it's the same. So some runes you can't really read reversed, but for the ones that can, in the guidebook you get the reversed meanings and upwards meanings, so I think that's really cool. As someone who loves cards, having a rune deck makes so much more sense as a learning tool than having the physical objects, because I do have a set of runes and I never play with them because it's too daunting to try and figure out what is the meaning of everything. So I think that this is a great resource if you're new, and of course if you are familiar to runes, then you could really enjoy add this to your collection. I think the artwork is really beautiful when they are all together. They look great, and we still have the same with the other decks. The color story still applies in the sense that blues and greens are neutral colors. Yellow informs you that it's more positive, light energies, and oranges reference more challenging or darker energies, and that was also super helpful for me as well, because some of the cards are only yellow, for example, so this Fehu, I believe that's how you say it. Straight away as a beginner, I'm like, okay, this is good news. Whereas this one is like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. So I thought the use of color here, especially for the runes, was the most helpful for me. I didn't pay too much attention in the tarot. Maybe that's because I'm much more familiar with tarot. It's my preferred system. I've got years of use behind me of it. But for the runes as a beginner, I thought that particular color theme was really useful. I found the artwork to be really beautiful, really cohesive with the other deck. It invites you in this kind of like natural but otherworldly world. It's very cohesive with all the other decks, and so I really enjoyed that. And let's look at the guide. The guidebook is 65 pages. Again, you have a note from James, just like all the other guidebooks, and then you have some information as to how he came to use the runes, and like I was explaining to you, how he decided to create the cards as a way for him to help him understand. We have some explanation here as to how the Elder Fusark runes are adapted from the alphabet, and there's just a little bit of a history here, which I actually really enjoyed. And my favorite part of this in terms of history is that there's even mentions of the darker history of runes, which is the fact that some of them were incorporated in Nazi propaganda. And this is something I'd never heard about, and I'm so pleased that this was mentioned, because it's important when we use the systems to know their history and to know how they were used, whether positively or negatively in history. So I appreciate the fact that he didn't shy away from, giving us a full history of the runes, the lighter and the darker side of them. Of course, this is a very old system. It wasn't created for that purpose, but it's interesting to know how along the years some of them might have been interpolated and used. Just as the other decks, you get a lot of spreads ideas, you get example readings, exercises, which for myself I found super helpful, and then you get the breakdown of each of the runes. So for example, for Geibu, which is the best rune name ever, Geibu, I love that. It's the best rune pronunciation ever. I'm obsessed. I didn't know nothing about rune, but I love Geibu. I think that's so cute. So for this particular rune, we have a bit of the history. We have upward meanings, like upward keywords, and we have reverse keywords. And what I also thought was quite helpful is that for each of the rune you get the pronunciation. So for someone who's completely clueless, such as myself, it's really useful. Okay, before I quickly show you how you could be using all of those decks together, I just want to show you the extra glossary that you can get. This is a beautiful hardbound book. Honestly, the edges are still these beautiful prismatic edges. It's the quality, it's outstanding. For me, this is more of a collector's piece, if I'm completely honest. Like I was saying in the intro, I received this deck in advance so that I could use it, and I found myself on the go taking the little guidebooks from each individual decks because they were smaller. I could put them in my bag and I wasn't afraid to damage them. This one I feel like I wouldn't want to take around purely because it's just so beautiful, and for me this is more something that you'd want to use at home, get cozy, get a cup of tea and get into the book, more so than something you want to take around with you. Plus it's much heavier because it contains all of the 4 guidebooks from all of the 4 decks. So the way that it's built, of course, you got a table of content. You get everything that's already in the guidebook. So you get the Tarot guidebook, the Lenormand guidebook, the Rune guidebook, and the Oracle guidebook. They are defined by colors. So if it's blue, I mean Tarot. If it's yellow, I mean the Lenormand. Once I'm in orange, I'm in the Rune world. And then once I'm in the green, I'm in the Oracle world. So it's the same information than you have in the individual guidebooks that come with each text, but what changes is that the last section, so from here, this is an explanation on how to use all the decks together. He gives you example of exercises, examples, readings, etc. on how you could use all the decks as a mega deck. Honestly, this is why I said for me this is more of a collector's piece, because personally I know for my own way of reading I wouldn't use this to take with me. I wouldn't use this to read with, just because it's a bit more cumbersome and a bit more heavy. I much prefer the little guidebooks for that, but as its own standalone piece, and if you enjoy beautiful books and beautiful pieces of art kind of things, and if you're a collector and you enjoy having set of things together, then it's beautifully produced. Not something that I personally would be using a lot, but I think as a collector's piece it's a beautiful object. Now I want to quickly get into how I've been using those decks together, because I've had some time to actually give these decks a spin, where I've used the Tarot on its own, I've used the Oracle on its own, I've used the runes as a way to start to get the runes, and I've into the Lenormand as a way to kind of refresh my memory on my basic Lenormand knowledge. But I want to share with you quickly how the decks could look if you kind of mix them together as a mega deck, because that's the idea really. So here are all 4 decks put together. Here I have the Lenormand, the Oracle, the Rune deck, and the Tarot. Knowing how I personally work with decks, I would want to keep the Tarot separately, because that's its own system, it's just the way I read, and I know myself and how I would want to read, and I know I would want to pull some cards from Tarot and then expand with a mega Oracle. And so my favorite way of combining everything together has been to keep the Tarot separately, but actually combine the Rune, the Lenormand, and the Oracle to make a mega Oracle deck. My advice, if you want to combine such a big deck, is that you want it to be super well shuffled. So for me, I make 5 piles because my life number is past, and it's just this little strange quirky habit I have that every time I want to shuffle a deck in, I make 5 piles. Some people make 3, you can make 10, 20, you do your boo. That's the beauty of this deck. Again, I can't accentuate enough that the idea here is to do what you want, to do what you enjoy, and to just follow your intuition, follow your gut. The aim is to have fun, the aim is to expand your mind, to get out your comfort zone. I think that's the biggest thing here, is to get out your comfort zone and get a bit of freedom. So I'm just sharing with you like how I do it, but please do your own thing. I'm just putting it at random in 5 different piles to make sure that all of the 3 decks, Runes, Lenormand, and Oracle, are all mixed in together. I find that easier at first to try and shuffle them in, but then we're gonna give them good shuffles anyway. Once I've done that, I gather all of them together into one big pile, and then I'll give them one big shuffle. The reason why I decided to mix Oracle, Lenormand, and Rune together is because to me they can all become this Oracle together. We can suddenly step away from the Rune system and the Lenormand system and have a lot more freedom by just interpreting each symbol on its own without the necessary combination that would be pertinent to each system. It suddenly gives a lot more freedom to use your intuition. If you wanted to, of course, you could still incorporate the tarot. You could, if you didn't want one mega deck, just pick a couple of your favorite oracle cards and add them into your tarot deck, for example, as extra cards or as significator. I could have put the pig as my significator. You can use them as significator or as extra major arcana cards, but that have your own particular meaning to it. So once we give it a good shuffle, let's get a message for the collective. I'm gonna read this completely intuitively and read this as if I would read it for myself. Get a little reading to finish the video so that you can see how it reads. We have the moon card, we have the spoon card, and we have the portal. So for me, the moon as a symbol outside of Lenormand, it represents the subconscious, it represents potentially our dreams, our inner desires, what we're not quite seeing, and then we have the spoon and the portal. So if I was to read them intuitively together, I would see this as, this is an invitation to pay attention to what our subconscious is trying to tell us right now, potentially what we're seeing in our dreams, symbolism we're not paying attention to, maybe even potentially old wounds that are resurfacing to the surface that are needing our attention, that might be getting in the way of us figuring out what we value in our wealth and what we want to put importance on. For me, the spoon can reference wealth. You know, we have this saying in France, I don't know if it's the same in English, we say people who are born with a golden spoon in their mouth, saying they're born rich. Yeah, but there's also this saying that says you make your own wealth. So what is wealth to you will be different to what is wealth for someone else. So maybe we're invited to pay attention to fears or subconscious or old wounds or anything like that might be or dreams that are resurfacing, in order to have more clarity on what matters to us, what we value, what is wealth for us, what we want to put our time, intention, money, and dedication to, in order for us to start a new chapter, to open new doors. For me, the portal is definitely giving me full vibes. So it's this idea of a new adventure, a new chapter in our life, a new fresh start. So that's how I would read very quickly, obviously off the cuff. I'm giving you an example of how would you use this as an oracle. I hope that's helpful. This video is probably very long, so I'll stop there. I can share more of it on my social media if you want to see how I read with this. I hope this video was helpful for anyone who's considering getting the deck. Again, the Kickstarter starts on Monday, the 3rd of October. In the description box, you're gonna get all the information. You're gonna get all the links to where you can get this. I want to say a huge thank you again to James R. Eads and their team for trusting me to review this deck. I was really honored, and it was a joy for me to give this deck a go. And I want to thank you who's watching for being here on my channel, for your support, for your kindness. It truly means the world, and I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so thankful. I am sending you so much good vibes, and keep navigating the waves of your soul. Bye!